Millions of children face weeks with no school as Boris reveals huge list of areas where primary schools must shut to all but vulnerable children and kids of key workers, and warns some secondary school pupils could stay at home indefinitely. Primary schools in worst-hit coronavirus hotspots will not be allowed to reopen. Primary schools in dozens of areas across London, Kent and Essex to stay shut. The schools will only be open to vulnerable children and children of key workers. Ministers also pushed back return of secondary schools and colleges by a week. Rethink comes as ministers desperately try to slow the spread of coronavirus. Primary schools in England's worst-hit coronavirus hotspots will remain shut at the start of term on January 4 as ministers desperately try to slow the spread of the disease. Education Secretary Gavin Williamson announced this afternoon that primary schools in dozens of areas across London, Essex, Kent and beyond will not be allowed to reopen as planned. Vulnerable children and the children of key workers will be the only pupils allowed to attend the schools in person, with all of their classmates being forced to switch to online learning. Mr. Williamson also announced the planned staggered return of secondary schools and colleges is being pushed back by a week to provide more time to roll out mass COVID-19 testing for pupils and staff. Students in years 11 and 13 who are facing exams will physically return on January 11, a date which had originally been earmarked for the return of all secondary and college pupils in England. Students in the other year groups will now have to wait an extra week until January 18 to return. However, Boris Johnson suggested this evening that even that return date could be changed for some schools, as he said the government's approach will be shaped by infection rates. The government's original plan was for the majority of secondary school and college pupils to start the term online from January 4 before resuming face-to-face lessons from January 11.